Alrighty then. Well, I had to come back a little early. The one machine I was using, I used up both batteries with it. It's a battery-powered weed eater. That was cutting down the growth in the ditches in front of the house at the peep where I go to work sometimes. And the other machine, which you've seen on my videos before, that has the big spinning saw blade that I'm using to grind down the excess stuff on the stumps that are eventually going to be taken out. They're eventually going to be cut down with a chainsaw, but I'm grinding down all the excess growth that's around them and stuff, and I'm also taking out small tree stumps with it and so on. That machine has been acting up a lot lately. There's something with the carburetor or something, I don't know, but anyway, it's not working right, and so it needs to be repaired again, and so I'm here now until 3 o'clock. By 3 o'clock, both batteries for the other machine should be charged, and I can go back to cutting the stuff down in the ditch, and that should give me another half hour to an hour's work. And hopefully I'll get it all done between the two batteries. But yeah, that's what's happened anyway. Not too much we can do about it, unfortunately. It just is what it is. These things happen, but it does mean I get a little break. I just gave Rocky some wet food in there. That's my last can of wet food. I've got to get more wet food for him quickly, too, because if his bowels being the way they are, he needs a lot of wet food right now. Anyway, that's it for the time being. That's what's going on. Actually, before I let you go, I'll tell you a story. I was thinking about this morning, and I was thinking about how there are people who have a lot materially, but they don't really have a whole lot of anything. And my former landlord at my apartment building in Perth, Ontario, Canada, where I rented for 28 years. 28 years? Yeah, from 1988 to 2016. Anyway, that landlord, I'll tell you something. He had cut our hot water and our heat off for 2 years. And I think it was to save money or whatever, because it was included in the rent. And I kind of went to war with him, and I got the heat and hot water turned back on eventually. But it was an uphill battle, I'll tell you. And I made a really dangerous enemy in the process, because this guy was psychopathic. Like, he was literally psychopathic. And also, he had the local police in his back pocket. And the local police already didn't like me. So the harassment on their part escalated at that time as well, They started following me around more and just generally bothering me more because I had done that. Forced him to turn on the heat and hot water. And anyway, but I'll tell you something about the situation there. When he was growing up, he was taught to be ruthless. Now, his mother is a really good-hearted person, but she really had not a lot of say in things. And like I say, I got along with his father okay too. I mean, I didn't hate his father or anything. But his father was quite ruthless. And his father, I think, taught him to be that way too. And he already has psychopathic tendencies. So it really wasn't a good combination. And of course, he was used to doing as he pleased and getting away with it too, because there was very little accountability other than from his father. He was afraid of his father, but he really didn't fear anybody else too much. And anyway, I'm going to tell you about a conversation, though, that I had with the sister of that family. Really nice person, an awful lot like the mother in her personality and so on. And a very, very good-hearted person. But also a person who, suffers from trauma and so on because of, just having I suppose, an upbringing where she wasn't really allowed to be who she wanted to be, and who she really was. And that lady is quite heavy. She's a huge woman, and what she's doing is she's eating herself to death. You know, just like people do when they have a drug addiction or an alcohol addiction. This lady, she's doing it with food, you know. Really, it's a slow suicide is what it is when it comes right down to it, you know, and it's a tragic thing. But a very nice lady, and I had a conversation with her many years ago. I'm going back now, like back into the 1980s, and she said something to me that stays with me to this day. I never forgot what she told me. What she told me was, she said, in our house, when I was growing up, we had everything except love. That's what she said. She said, we had everything except love. Now, like I say, I know the mother, and the mother is a very kind person and a decent person. And I'm sure they had some love from her. You know, I would imagine they did. But generally speaking, I think what she said was accurate. My oldest sister was a friend of hers in high school and told me a story one time. They all went down, they'd hang out at a restaurant downtown. Anyway, this lady, my oldest sister, and this lady, you know, when she was just young, were hanging around together in high school. And it was the mother's birthday. And they were in the restaurant, you know, like they often would go down to this restaurant and hang out. And the restaurant had a banquet room at the back that could be rented out for business meetings and, you know, business lunches and things like that. Anyway, because her dad was a big businessman in town, and if I were to say his name, which I'm not going to do, but if I did, anybody from my hometown would immediately know the name, you know, because he owned half the town. He's passed on now anyway, but he owned half the town back in his day. Anyway, he came in with a bunch of other businessmen. They were going into the back. They had a lunch meeting, you know. Anyway, it was the mother's birthday, his wife's birthday, the mother of the girl I'm talking about now. And my sister told me this story because she was there. She went to her dad as he was coming in. She approached him and she says, Dad, would you be able to give me a little money? And he said, well, yeah, I think I can do that. What do you want it for? And she says, well, you know, it's Mom's birthday today. And he said, yeah, I know that. And she says, well, I'd like to buy Mom a cake. And he said, oh, well, in that case, you can't have the money. Because he said, look, if you were going to do something for yourself with the money, that'd be fine. But, you know, because you want to do something for somebody else, you can't have the money. Because he said, you need to learn to look after yourself and to look out for yourself in this world and not to be worried about anybody else. So no, he said, you want to do something for your mom? He said, it's nice that you want to do something for your mom, but I'm not going to give you the money because you need to learn that lesson. And that was it. So that's the kind of upbringing that lady had anyway. And, you know, like I say, you know, a lot of people envy the rich. And it's not as if there aren't certain things to envy, but they have their problems too, you know, and it's not always a happy life for them either. You know, there's none of us exempted in this life from hardship and misery and so on. It just takes different forms, that's all. The kind of hardship and misery I suffer isn't the same as the kind of hardship and misery another person suffers, but it's all equally valid. You know, that guy's pain is just as valid as my pain. And they're just as human as I am, and they get hurt just like I do. You know, like they say, if you cut them, they bleed just like you do. That is true. So, you know, sometimes we forget because we get too hung up on social status and things like that, and we forget But at the end of the day, we're all just human beings trying to get by in this world, And we need to be grateful for what we got and make the most of it. And we need to remember that the other guy, he's just trying to get by like we are, Anyway, yeah, that was a profound thing that she said to me, though, years ago, that lady. She said, in our house, when I was growing up, we had everything except love. If you don't have love, doesn't matter what else you've got. Doesn't really matter, Anyway, that's it for now. That's just the story I recall anyway. I was thinking about that this morning, Like I say, my landlord, he definitely, I would say we are enemies. My former landlord, from Perth, we're definitely enemies. But I do understand that was a guy that really couldn't be any different than he is in many ways. Although we all make choices, obviously he could be. Ebenezer Scrooge made a choice to be different, if you look at the old Christmas Carol story. But there again, Ebenezer Scrooge had an awful rude awakening, and that's when he made that choice. It didn't come to him naturally. And there are certain people in this world that's just how it is. They need a good kick up the backside before they'll change, and before they will realize the mistakes they've made. And the sad thing is, if they don't realize it, well, then their future ends up being just like the future that Ebenezer Scrooge was shown by the third ghost in that story. I always liked Charles Dickens. I did. I always really enjoyed the Charles Dickens story. Anyway, that's it for now anyway, and we'll talk to you later.